Hi, now we are going to talk about the properties in Python class. So, property help you to get, set, and the delete function attribute. So, sorry, it's deleting the instance attribute, right? So, property help you to manage the instance attribute, right, with a very different way, right? So here we'll discuss more about the property, but we are just trying to look at the basics of how property help you to manage the attribute instance, right? So in general, property is in Python is essentially a class instance. We'll see that later on. But for now, we are going to use the property functions in a Python, which is like to work around with the properties, right? Now here let's start with a simple class. We have this class person, we have this init method, right? And now here let's create the object of the class person by giving the name as an Alex. Now we can access the name attribute by using dot notation or by using get attribute and the set attribute method. We can say that p dot name, we are we are accessing the name attribute value. We can also use get attribute functions, right? It's the same value. We can set the name. We are saying p dot name as John. We can say p dot name as John. We can also set the new attribute as p dot name as Eric. Now it is an Eric. So now we know how to change and access the attribute value. Now suppose we want to disallow the setting to empty string or none for the name. That means, let's say that we want to change the behavior of this name attribute value. That means to we do not want to set the name attribute as a none. Like let's say that if a person which will try to set the name attribute value as a none, right? So it will give you an error. Or if a person set the name attribute value with the empty string, it should give the error, but currently it will not, right? So basically we required a name to be a string. To do so, we are going to create an instance method that will handle the logic and setting of the value, right? We are also creating the instance method to retrieve the attribute value. Here we'll use this underscore name as an attribute variable to store the name. So here we have again defined the class person with the init. Now this init method takes the name and it will say that self.set name as a name, and the set name has been defined over here. When the set name value will be called, right? So it will check that whether this value is string, and if the length of the string is greater than the 0. If this is that, basically we are checking that whether this string is non-empty, right? If this is the scenario, then we'll set the name attribute value. Otherwise we'll get the error, otherwise we'll raise the error as a name must be the non-empty string. And then to get the name, we have defined a function called getName, which will return you self.name, right? So here our value is stored in this underscore name, right? Let's call this. And when we say p dot person Alex, this will ultimately call the init method and ultimately call the set name. Now let's try to do the p dot set name method, and now we are passing the values on 100. When we do so, we'll get the error. The name must be non-empty string. When we do so, set name Eric, we can do that. We can also get the name as an Eric. Now we can still manipulate this name attribute by direct accessing it. But again, as a good programmer, we do not should we do not should change the any value of the attribute with the underscore or double underscore value available, right? So if anything, if any attribute which is started with the underscore or double underscore, we should not change it directly. This is what the as a good programmer thing is, right? Now the way we set our initializer is, so like over here, we are saying that p dot p equal to person, and now we are setting up the empty string. This would also throw the error. This is also throwing me the error, right? But here, to work with that, we have to call the method to set the name. To get the name, we have to call the method. We are not using the dot notation over here. right? That is a pane over here. So let's change it. So here we are tweaking the code. Here we have the person, we have the self dot name as a name. Now we are setting the name attribute value with the name. We have this get name method which will set as an self dot underscore name. We have the set name method again, right? Now here in the last line we are using a property function, right? And as now in the f get parameter, we are giving the name as in get name, and as the f set parameter, we are using the name as in set name. That means, and now the property itself is called a name. That means when you change the name attribute, it will call the get name method. So when you call the name attribute value, it will call the get name method, and when you change the name attribute value, it will automatically call the set name method. And this is all happening based on the property functions. Let's try to run this. Here we are creating an object. We're saying p.name. It's Alex. When we do p.name, it will it will call get.name over here. When we call p.name as array, it is happening. But here we are trying to set the name attribute as a none. We'll get error. Right now our dot notation is working. So now we have the benefit of using accessor method, right? Without having to call the method directly. We are not calling this method directly, but now we are calling this direct accessor. We are using the dot method. In fact, we can even use this get attr and the set attr, right? So when we use set attr p, we are saying name as John. It is ultimately setting as p.name as John, and we are also using the get attr function. Right? Now let's examine the instance dictionary. When we say p.dict, we are having this underscore name as in John. So as an instance dictionary, we have this name attribute as in John. Now we are using this name attribute, right? Now, when we check person.dict, what we'll see is we'll also see this name as an dict as a property object. So this name is still there in the property object, but this name is available in the class. Right? So this name property is available in the class. This is not available directly in the object, right? So we can type p.name or p.name as value, but Python recognize the name as a property, right? Python sees that name, it is a property, it is not the attribute, and therefore uses the accessor method. It uses this get name and the set name method, right? So, but what is the interesting is, even if we kind of change the instance dictionary, right? Like over here, we are saying that here we are getting the object as this person. We are saying p.name, we are saying dict. Now, when we do p.dict.name as in John, when we do p.dict.name, so this like now we know that we are adding this name attribute and the value is John to the instance directly. When we do this, now we can see name as in John. But when we access it, when we say p.name via dot notation, it is not John, it is Alex. Why? Because when we call p.name, it calls the attribute. It does not, so it calls the property, it does not call the attribute value. It calls this underscore name over here, right? And when we say p.name as Raymond, when we get p.dict, we can see that this attribute has changed. This has not changed, right? As we can see, it uses the setter method, right? We can use get attr method over here, like p.name. We can see that it is still using the Raymond. It is not using this name value, this name key and the value. And we can also change the value with the set attr function. Right? Now for completeness, here is how we delete the method. So here we have this all the method over here, right? Now we have this underscore name as a name value, right? We have this get name, we have this set name, we have this delete name, which will call the self, which basically we are deleting the name with the del attribute with the del keyword. Now we are deleting self dot name over here, right? And again, we have set the property as get name, set name, and delete name. So it has this three property. Now when we do this, p.dict, it is this Alex, right? And when we do p.name, right, it is accessing the, we can see that it is accessing the get attribute because it is calling get name. We can call here, we when we change the name, it will call setting name. We can check whether the name has been set. Here we are deleting p.name. It will call deleting name. So that means we have deleted the name. We can check whether the p.dict is empty or not. It is empty. But now the property still exists. We have not deleted it. Why? Because this property is still defined in the class. We have deleted with respect to the instance, but this property is still there. It is not removed, right? So when we try to get p.name, it says that again it is calling getting name, but it says that person object has no attribute name, right? So this name property is there, right? This attribute is not there, so this property is still there, right? And now it is giving you this person object has no attribute name. That means you can still access or you can still define a new value. We can say that p.name as an Alex. Now this name property is still there, right? This is no, now this again, see, this name is not a attribute. This is still the property. This is still the property, right? And the last parameter of the property is the doc string. Like over here, we have set the doc as in the person name, right? So when we do this, when we check help of person dot name, it will says that help on property and the person's name. It will give you this doc string, right? Now when we say help of person, we can see that this is the name as a name described as a data descriptor, and it is a person's name. So this is the description of the name property we have, right? Right. And this is it. This is it all about the properties, right? Thank you very much.